Good morning, everyone. My name is Irene Gao. I'm the Executive Director of Courage California. Thank you for joining us today, and I'm excited to speak about the recall along with our partners here on this call. So last year, President Biden referred to the 2020 election as the battle for the soul of the nation. While we had some important wins in that election, it's clear that the battle continues. We fight this current surge in white supremacy, right-wing extremism, disinformation, and anti-science. Republicans are passing bills across the country to actively suppress voters, especially voters of color, after historic turnout in 2020. They're denying rights and protection for trans people and fighting criminal justice reforms demanded by our communities tooth and nail. So here in California, we are facing a battle for the soul of our state. Between the January 6th insurrection planned by many extremists and inflamed by Republican elected officials from California and the September 14th gubernatorial recall we are facing now. What we, as the majority of the state with shared values of equity, justice, and accountability, do in the next 2 months leading up to the election will set the course for California for decades. So today, Courage California stands in unity with our partners here on this call and around the state to say no to the recall, yes to progress. This recall election is a power grab led by Republicans, white supremacists, and extremists who are driving a dangerous anti-immigrant, anti-justice agenda. They are capitalizing on people's trauma and personal hardships from the pandemic to expand and motivate a base of people to unseat a governor who won his 2018 election with over 60% of the vote and has led the largest state in the nation through a historic time under the Trump administration, the pandemic, and now drought and wildfire season. A successful recall would absolutely result in a Republican governor and likely one elected by less than 50% of the vote, as was the case with Governor Schwarzenegger in 2003. That would mean a minority of voters chose our next governor. A Republican governor would set us on a divergent path from where we are now, threatening any gains we've made on all the issues that matter to us that our partners will speak to more on this call today. So while, of course, Governor Newsom has made mistakes over the course of his political career, he has demonstrated a commitment to issues that matter to the majority of Californians, and polls and research show this over and over again, including Medicare for all, LGBTQIA+ rights, criminal justice reform, and renter protections. These shared priorities allow community groups like Courage California and our partners again here to strategically co-govern with his administration. And I know we won't have that opportunity at all if the recall succeeds and a Republican governor is elected. Polls have identified an enthusiasm gap between voters who support the recall, who of course lean Republican, and voters who oppose the recall, who lean more Democrat, with supporters of the recall highly motivated. So they're paying more attention to the recall and they're planning to vote in the recall election at higher rates. Anecdotally, we've heard from people directly and also through our partners as well about how people aren't even aware that the recall election is happening. Voters don't know how to vote on the ballot, and how people are just feeling really complacent because Newsom is polling pretty well in terms of his approval numbers and in terms of where voters would vote today if they had to vote on the recall. But we all know, again, from the 2020 election and other elections as well, that polling doesn't win elections, voter turnout does. That's why Courage and our partners are strongly advocating for voters to vote no on the recall, yes to progress on September 14th. This election should reflect the will of all California voters, and that means standing with the governor. The governor a majority of Californians elected and continue to support. We need to speak directly to voters to inspire them to vote as if their lives depend on it, because they do. The governor leads on critical policy decisions that impact all of our communities and issues, and now is the time we stand with Governor Newsom and vote no to the recall, yes to progress. And as I mentioned, each of our partners today will speak to how the governor has delivered for communities around the state on different issues and what is at stake with this recall election. So first, I'd like to turn it to our first partner, Amy Allison of Women Against the Recall and founder and president of She the People. And she's going to speak to how the recall election is going to impact our goals for justice. Amy?
Thank you so much, Irene. I'm Amy Allison, founder and president of She the People, a national network of civically engaged women of color that extends through California and nationally. Women of color in California are the strongest core vote of the Democratic Party, and they comprise over a quarter of all California voters. This is significant when we look at the recall only weeks away. In the past year, She the People's worked actively with other groups throughout the state to advocate to the governor to appoint a Black woman to the Senate. That effort was called Secure the Seat. And most recently, those in Secure the Seat have led the only women-led statewide effort to defeat the recall. And we call this collaborative Women Against the Recall. And it has become and coalesced into a powerful force that includes elected officials, organizational leaders, activists from every corner of the state. And it's important to note that Women Against the Recall reflects the diversity and strength of California, Black, Latina, Asian American, transgender women in a united effort. The recall would have serious long-term effects for California women and our communities. For us, we've been focused on the appointment powers of Governor Newsom. He has the power to appoint key states, and we want him to continue to be in that powerful position to appoint the next senator in California, should that opportunity arise. Black women in particular are not represented in the Senate. And it's a big focus for us here in California. But Black women in California and nationally have led a multiracial Democratic coalition. And a Republican in the governor's seat would threaten our Senate majority. So the arguments, not just for representation, although representation is very important, it is to maintain the Democrats' majority in the Senate in 2022, that key election. If a Senate seat were to become vacant under Republican governor, it would spell the end of the Democratic Senate majority with disastrous effects to women and families here in California and everywhere. So those behind the recall should know there will be no quarter here in this state for the regressive and racist forces in this great state. The women of the state, the women of color in the state simply will not allow this cynical and opportunistic political attack to succeed. Right-wing Republicans' rule created the chaos and threats to our health and safety and economy and democracy over the past years, and we do not want that for California, and we're going to work to defeat that. California needs stability. We need continuity to deal with the COVID pandemic and economic recovery. And we're going to activate statewide California's women to stand up for leadership that aligns with our values, not some partisan power grab based on prejudices and racism that threaten our values, our rights, and the important work that California needs to do as a great, inclusive, and progressive state. Women Against the Recall stands with Governor Newsom. We're going to do everything we can to activate women of color throughout the state to defeat the recall.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate that. Next, we're going to go to Pablo with CNC.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Pablo Rodriguez. I am the Executive Director of Communities for a New California Action Fund. Today, I'll be talking about the digital divide and safe drinking water in the rural areas of California, specifically the San Joaquin and the Coachella Valley. I think it's also important to note that the results of the last recall election that we faced nearly 20 years ago resulted in Arnold Schwarzenegger leaving California families with nearly a $25 billion budget deficit. It's important to bring that up because regions like the San Joaquin and Coachella Valleys took the brunt of the austerity which followed. And today, contrary to what happened then, we are debating a Governor Newsom budget surplus. And so I think it's important to talk about how resources are now being allocated to regions, whereas before we were caught in the crossfire of austerity. So rather than debating that in the way that we did in the early 2000s and cutting to the bone, programs are being put in place, planning for the future and addressing vital issues such as the digital divide. Earlier this week, Governor Newsom was in Traver, California in Tulare County, and Governor Newsom signed a $6 billion multi-year investment aimed at giving every Californian access to affordable, high-speed internet. The signing was at Traver Elementary School, which represents the same as many other students faced across California as we went to distance learning as a result of the pandemic. With the rise of the Delta variant, we see that this is going to continue to be an issue and an investment must continue to be made. And as Governor Schwarzenegger stated in Traver, there is nothing that distinguishes the students from Traver Elementary School versus those in Palo Alto, just 300 miles away. Nothing except the opportunity. And I think that what I would add that is we would add nothing except the opportunity and an investment by local governments, regional governments, and the state government. In the issue related to safe drinking water, regions like the San Joaquin Valley have been caught in the crossfire of the water wars. Families specifically have been the ones that have been caught in the crossfire because each year, over 1 million Californians are exposed to unsafe drinking water from the taps of their homes, schools, churches, parks, and community centers. The problem is both urgent and chronic because approximately 300 small public water systems have been unable to supply safe drinking water to their communities for several years or even decades. At the beginning of his administration, Governor Newsom worked with organizations such as the Community Water Center in the Central Valley and signed the Safe Affordable Drinking Water Fund. And what we know is that when fully implemented, the Safe and Affordable Drinking Water Fund will mean freedom from fear for Californians turning on their taps for water to drink, to bathe in, to cook, to make baby formula. This sustainable funding will make life-changing differences for California communities facing high costs and serious health threats from contaminated water. As was stated before, we cannot go backwards. And I encourage all Californians to focus on the progress and reject the recall. And with that, I'll throw back to Angela.
Thank you, Pablo. Next, we're going to go to Matt with CLCV.
Hi, my name is Matt Abularach-Macias. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I live in the Inland Empire. And I am the campaigns and organizing manager for the California League of Constitutional Voters, CLCV, and also coming today as the board chair for the Inland Region Quality Network, Irene. And frankly, it's ridiculous that we even have to do this today. Those who are supporting and funding the recall effort have no real ground to push for this recall or an attempted recall. It's propagated by the people who stood by in support of a former president who locked children in cages, separated families, deregulated protections on our health and environment for big oil, and took actions to harm trans and LGBTQ+ individuals, and incited an attempted overthrow of the government. That's who these people are. And they have no real argument for attempting to recall Governor Gavin Newsom, and nor any higher ground to stand on. So it begs the question, why are they trying to do this? Honestly, they're wasting a lot of time and resources, which is on brand for what this recall election is about. It's about delaying progress for California. Governor Gavin Newsom's agenda, we know, is widely popular amongst most Californians. And unfortunately, the potential consequences of a recall would be incredibly harmful to us all. On the environment, Governor Newsom has been fulfilling California's values and working to protect us all from the most harmful effects of the climate crisis. He pushed for clean, affordable drinking water, as you just heard from Pablo. He signed executive orders that would phase out fossil fuel usage and production in California. He's pushed for the protection of our beautiful public lands and natural resources. And he's done so by putting those most disproportionately affected by the climate crisis and environmental injustices first, especially in inland communities like the Inland Empire. All things that Californians consistently say they want our leadership to prioritize, and he has. And on LGBTQ+ rights and inclusion, Governor Newsom has been a strong ally to our community. We know his history with marriage equality, and he's also done a lot to expand access to life-saving HIV prevention medication, and also protecting transgender Californians from discrimination. If you look at other states that have leadership that aren't allies, you see them moving to limit protections, rights, inclusion for trans folks, and for the LGBTQ+ community. That is not the direction we want California to go in. You might wonder, how are these connected? And it really comes down to the safety and well-being of Californians. If the recall passes, any other leader would push against an agenda that is pro-environment, pro-LGBTQ+, which is out of touch with California's values. Governor Newsom continues to be the governor that reflects who California is at our best. If you want California to continue to be a global leader on addressing the climate crisis with equity at the center, if you want California to continue to be an inclusive and safe state for all, no matter how you identify, then we need to make sure that this recall fails. And we need to support Governor Newsom to continue and allow him to continue to focus on California's biggest challenges and the issues that voters actually care about. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Next, we're going to hear from Zuluma from Cause Action Fund.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zulema Aleman, and I'm a community organizer with Cause Action. Cause Action is an economic, social, and environmental justice organization on the Central Coast. Being an agricultural region, we've been grateful to Governor Newsom for taking action to support essential agricultural workers who provide food not only to the state of California, but to many states in our country. Throughout the pandemic, agricultural workers have experienced a higher risk of exposure due to field and packing facility working conditions, a lack of preventative education, PPE, and healthcare, crowded transportations to and from work sites, and overcrowding housing conditions. Governor Newsom allocated funding to launch the massive statewide COVID-19 worker outreach program executed by the California Labor Workforce Development Agency. This innovative effort has provided funding for community-based organizations like Cause Action to do direct outreach with farm workers and other vulnerable workers related to COVID-19 safety, vaccines, access to sick time through SB 95, and protection from retaliation. Through this program, we've hired a dozen farm worker promotores across the region to do peer-to-peer outreach. In total, we've contacted over 15,000 workers via phone, in-person, text, and mail. Our work goes beyond outreach and education as we move to training, leadership development, and empowerment of these workers. We've hosted Zoom meetings with over 200 workers to talk about their rights, connect them to local and statewide resources available to them, and show them the power of being united. As an organization, we've conducted outreach and education in Ventura and Santa Barbara counties, and I've personally seen how this program has allowed our team and partner organizations to do the necessary work to protect our community's health. In particular, to undocumented immigrants and indigenous migrants who often speak limited Spanish and need tailored resources and education in indigenous languages. At the beginning of the pandemic, Santa Barbara County had the largest number of cases amongst agricultural workers with an outbreak in agricultural guest work housing that led to the hospitalization of many workers and the death of one. The combined response of the state providing supplemental paid sick leave to workers and the ability of funded community organizations to do significant outreach and education helped to address the disproportionate cases amongst agricultural workers. Our county's public health director noted a direct correlation and credited our work through the LWDA program as part of the decreasing hospitalization and positive cases amongst farm workers locally. What's been especially inspiring about this program is how innovative it has been. A common phrase amongst us farm worker advocates is that the laws in the book are not the laws in the field. While we have some of the best labor laws in the country and statewide enforcement agencies tasked with protecting farm workers and workers in general, historically, our state hasn't gone far enough. The governor who launched this program and in launching this partnership between community organizations and statewide enforcement agencies is a powerful recognition between community organizations and statewide enforcement agencies and how effective trusted community organizations and workers themselves are ambassadors for the state, how we can support our state and our community's health from the ground up. This program is truly the ground floor for an exciting new phase in labor enforcement in our state, and we owe it to part of it to our governor. If he were to be recalled, this important work would not continue. Things would go back to business as usual, or worse, backslide, and our workers who have already been through so much will be left to fend for themselves. We ask Californians to recognize the critical role of Governor Newsom and the role that he has played in supporting immigrant workers, the backbone of our state. Vote no on the recall so we can keep our progress and keep roaring back. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we are going to go to Juan with ACE.
Good morning, all. I'm the Civic Engagement Coordinator for ACE. My pronouns are he, him. I'll be talking about our efforts relating to tenant policies in the state and how that relates to our opposition to the recall. ACE organizes people of color, immigrants, working class families who are battling for their communities. And for years, the ongoing housing crisis that we've been facing has been a direct threat to community. It threatens to displace people from their homes. We're talking about evictions, foreclosures, being outpriced. Part of the crisis has been a failure of ensuring housing as a human right, a failure of ensuring protections that keep people housed. One thing about our communities, they're resilient and they're fighters. This is why we fought for Assembly Bill 1482, the Tenant Protection Act, passed and signed into law by the governor 3 years ago. The law caps annual rent increases at 5% plus inflation in order to prevent rent gouging by unscrupulous landlords. It also prohibits evictions without just cause. All of this statewide. These are critical and basic protections. We use these gains to build, to fight for, and to eventually win the recognition of housing as a human right. These are protections that we have to fight to keep in place. We have to protect the protections. And then, of course, we have to recognize the moment that we're in. The pandemic hit and exacerbated the existing housing crisis. All of a sudden, people lost jobs, lost income, got the hours cut through no fault of their own. Meanwhile, the rent has still been due month after month after month, 15 months and counting, and we're still not fully recovered. The working class don't have full participation in an economic recovery, don't have their jobs back, their hours back. And from the very beginning, we were calling for rent cancellation, pushing the state in the bold, necessary direction we knew was needed for survival. A lot of politicians came back with excuses, a shrug of the shoulder. After a sustained campaign, we got Governor Newsom to propose 100% rent forgiveness to tenants. And we did pass Assembly Bill 832 to provide 100% rental assistance for those who need it, who are behind in rent and continue to be behind. Passed the bill, signed into law by the governor, providing needed, long-awaited relief to so many families. And that's the thing. We can fight to win major victories with Newsom, but Republicans opposed the rent forgiveness. The fact is that AB 832 passed with a majority of Republicans not voting or voting against it. The fact is that AB 1482 passed with not a single Republican voting for it. We're talking essential protections for millions, protections that set us on the right path, that set an example for other states. And the Republicans choose to either abstain or to oppose progress. A Republican governor would not only oppose our agenda, they would undo decades of progress. That's why we cannot let this conservative attack on our agenda stand. In our communities, there's ambition for so much more. Ambition for housing as a human right. Ambition to keep families housed, not displaced with no roof over their heads. That's the fight, the focus, and they offer us distractions. That's why ACE members are saying no to the recall and yes to progress. Yes to tenants' rights, yes to homeowner rights, yes to keeping families housed. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan, and thank you, Zulema, Matt, Pablo, and Amy. So to sum up, this recall election is feeding on disinformation and the uncertainty at the intersection of the pandemic, the drought, and wildfire season. So as our partners have pointed out, these are also the reasons why we need to stay on this pathway to progress and continue to push for the big and bold policies we need, not just to recover, but really build towards a California that works for everyone. So Californians need and they want single-payer healthcare. We need and want free and accessible public education. We need and want clean water and air. We need and want a just transition to clean energy and a supported workforce. We need and want affordable and guaranteed housing. We need and want expanded and unconditional protections and services for undocumented immigrants. And we need and want restorative justice. And we need and want reparations and repatriation of land to Indigenous communities. We need equity, justice, and accountability. This can only be possible with Governor Newsom in office. He led and signed an incredible budget this year, as Pablo mentioned, and the impact of this recall can be understood immediately in the fact that this special election is going to cost us all $276 million. That's $276 million at a time when we could have dedicated that level of investment to the pressing needs and priorities that exist in our communities as defined again by all of our partners today. So Courage and our partners here will focus the next 8 weeks leading up to the September 14th election, and especially the next 4 weeks until ballots go out and early voting opens on August 16th, on engaging and turning out voters. So every voter should know that this election is happening on September 14th, understand what's at stake for their communities and families and what they care about, and vote no on the recall to keep us on this pathway to progress with Governor Gavin Newsom. Courage and these partners here are a sample of the organizations that are banding together against the recall across issues, across communities, and across the state. More than 30 joined Courage in a joint statement against a recall in April, and since then we've been organizing an even broader coalition of groups to coordinate and plan on voter engagement and turnout for September 14th. We're also developing a speakers bureau of community-based leaders against the recall that we can make available for further media inquiries. Courage is also hosting a public No on the Recall, Yes to Progress Town Hall on Thursday, August 12th, 5 to 6:30 p.m. And that's just to bring elected officials and community leaders together, again, to speak out against the recall and rally voters to feel motivated and turn out for the September 14th election. This election is part of our battle for the soul of California, and we must all stand together to say no to the recall, yes to progress. Together, we will bring all of our resources to bear on such an important and stark choice for California voters. We will defeat this recall, and we will emerge stronger in the fall and get ready for more wins in 2022. We, as united community groups against the recall, represent the majority of Californians who want to see progress, equity, justice, and accountability in this state. Thank you all.